No.
So we finish with V'atam lezeh, the reason. In chapter 5, he gives the structure, the theoretical structure behind all of this. So that Torah and spirituality and Garden of Eden have to do with Memale, the light that fills all worlds, meaning integrated light. Whereas physicality, the world of resurrection, and the mitzvos have to do with the Sovev, with the light that surrounds, or the transcendent light. So the difference is that when the soul is in the afterlife, it still only receives from the light that fills all worlds. Again, it means that if a person in his lifetime does not develop a need, an existential need to be spiritual, and doesn't develop a spiritual language in his mind, then he comes to the afterlife and he's lost. He doesn't know what to do.
There's not a passport.
Yeah, pretty much. Doesn't speak the language. It's worse. He has a passport maybe because he lived, but he doesn't understand what is going on. And I think we talked about this, that the Malbim says that the first thing that the soul experiences after the afterlife is a sense of complete bewilderment at the fact that there's no time and space. Because time and space are what allows corporeal, physical existence to function the way that it does, and for us to understand it the way that we do.
So they don't daven in
They daven, but it's not in time. They daven all the time, because there's no time. That's how can the sages say, how can you translate from a spiritual reality to a physical reality? So they said, "Halavai v'yitpalel adam kol hayom kulo," that were it so that the person could pray all day long. But what they're not trying to say that you should waste your whole day not doing anything functional, not doing any mitzvos, and just pray. It was the contrary. In their time, most people didn't even pray once. They prayed once every 30 days, a lot of them. It wasn't this thing of davening every day, wasn't very common. Certainly not 3 times a day. So what did they mean when they said that were it so that a person would pray all day long? They meant to give a translation from a spiritual world in which there is no time into our world. And so for us it would be the situation that exists in the Garden of Eden in terms of prayer. For us that would translate as a person praying all day long. That's what it would seem like. Because there's no time. Okay? Ve'od chiluk, another difference between Gan Eden and Yemot HaMashiach. בגן עדן יש בכללות 2 בחינות, גן עדן התחתון וגן עדן העליון. ובכל אחד מהם יש ריבוי מדרגות עד אין קץ, כמו אמר הז"ל תלמידי חכמים אין להם מנוחה, לא בעולם הזה ולא בעולם הבא, meaning in the Garden of Eden, ילכו מחיל אל חיל, שעולים תמיד ממדרגה למדרגה. So the first thing is that in Gan Eden, there is a constant ascent. Because there is a lower Gan Eden and a higher Gan Eden. They don't mean to say there's one lower Garden of Eden, one higher. I mean to say that there are an infinite number of levels, and there's always one below and one above. And wherever you are on this continuum of levels,
on the escalator.
Okay, there's always a step below you and a step above you.
That's also in this world.
In this world, it's not true. Why? No.
Except unless you're perfect Sunday, who gets to be the top level?
You don't move in this world very much. Okay, Baal Tshuva. You have to do Tshuva. But the normal state of affairs is not that you have an ability to... Mobility is very limited here. Okay. What do you mean limited? It's possible, but it's not...
What makes you move in Gan Eden?
Great question. So what makes you move? So what makes you move is your hasaga, is how much you've integrated. So when you integrate the light, when you integrate what you're learning, what you're understanding, then that leads to a movement upwards. Okay. But to move upwards, you have to go through Nahar Dinu. You have to go through this river of fire, as it were, which again is a symbol. No, Kaf HaKela is something entirely different. It's before Gan Eden. It's a punishment, Kaf HaKela. So the soul has to go through a reset. The river of fire is like a reset. That you have to forget the previous level. You can't move up to the next one without forgetting the previous one. In any case, ברור שאין להם מנוחה הוא, שעלייתם ממדרגה למדרגה הוא על ידי עבודה. Okay? So you do this by toil. The toil, we said, is learning, is integrating things. And the soul needs to integrate things in the Garden of Eden. בעלייה צריך להיות מקודם תפילה בנהר דינור, לשכוח השגה ותענוג, במדרגה התחתונה. Okay. Which doesn't really mean that you forget about it, but you're open to a new type of integrated knowledge. You're open to a new way of looking at things. Usually, why is it so hard? Why is it difficult there? Because in the afterlife, the soul, in a sense, wants to rest. And so, whatever I have, I'm happy with. He says, no, you have to not be content. In the afterlife, you have to continue to be discontent. If there's anything you learned from this world, you can imagine that you come down into this world to learn one thing, really, to learn one thing. It's to learn how to move, how to be discontent. If you're not discontent spiritually, people learn it like physically, they're discontent. What's the one thing that you could say about all life? That it's discontent. It has no content. It's never quiet. If it's alive, it needs to eat something. If it's alive, it needs to move somewhere. It's like it's never frozen, like the inanimate. So even from plant life and on, you're constantly moving, constantly developing. That's why the soul comes down into this world, to learn that, because the natural state in the spiritual is static. The spiritual, by its nature, is much more prone to feel content. Why? Because it gets pleasure from God. It basks, as it were, in the light of God, meaning it has integrated some level of understanding. And that's where it's stuck. So that's why it wants to come down here, because they say down here, you learn how to move. You become somebody who's discontent, basically. And it's true. All of life is one long state of discontent. It's a hassle. Okay, but it's not just a hassle. Hassle is it's an inner angst that you're never happy where you are. Okay, and that's one of the worst things about modern life, that you can get everything very quickly. But you see that even in spite of the fact that people obtain what they need very quickly, they're still discontent. They're very discontent, because that you can't run away from. And that's why the soul comes down. So one person understands that he came down, and the only thing he needs to fulfill and be content with is the physical aspects of life. And the other person understands that the physical is only to teach you about the spiritual. That really what you need is spiritual discontent. You have to always be unhappy with what you have, spiritually. You have to want more. That's in the physical.
No, spiritual is the worst level.
Yeah, right. In the physical, you should be content with what you have, and transfer all that energy that's constantly discontent into the spiritual, because that was the real reason that the soul came down. That doesn't work so much with mitzvos, by the way, because with mitzvos, you do need to be discontent also, and they're physical. Okay. So when we say spiritual, we don't just mean like sitting down and learning and it's something spiritual, mindful. It's also spiritual actions. Spiritual actions like mitzvahs, like giving tzedakah. Should never be happy enough. Yeah, you do it with your corporeal self. You do it with the body. So people tend to say, but that's physical. Okay, it's true, it's physical, but we do it because of spiritual reasons. Okay? So that's the nature of this world. That's the whole reason why the soul came down. They said, the soul walks around Garden of Eden, and there's an advertisement on a tree. It says, eat from this tree and be transported to a place where all you'll want to do all day long is move from where you are. And the soul is like, wow, that sounds intriguing. And then they give you the packages, right? They say to you, look, we have a package where you'll be discontent at the level of 20%. And we have a package 30%, all the way up to 100% discontent. And the soul says, I'm willing to do anything for it. Give me the 100%. It comes down into this world. And then it discovers that 100% discontent means that you don't have an arm, you don't have a leg. It's some crazy, ridiculous thing. It's tafasta merube lo tafasta. Be careful what you wish for. Okay, but that discontent physically was supposed to be transformed into spiritual discontent as far as the soul was concerned. They didn't understand fully, maybe, that you learn it from the physical, and then you have to take it into the spiritual. That's why many of the tzaddikim had physically very difficult lives, because it was the difficulty of life that allowed them to transform it into spiritual discontent and seek to constantly better themselves. And that was okay, in any case. וגם העלייה עצמה היא דרך העמוד שבין מדרגה למדרגה, שגם על ידי זה הוא מתבטל מהשגתו הקודמת. And as we said, to move from level to level in the Garden of Eden, you have to pass through this river of fire. And it's also called sometimes the pillar. And the pillar is what takes you from level to level. And to go through this river of fire, this pillar, you have to be able to nullify the previous state, meaning to not be content with the level of basking in divine light that you had before. So a person who learns, okay, let's say they learn, he's sitting in the yeshiva in Garden of Eden, and he just finished the daf that he finished for the 3,000th time. He doesn't know how many times it is because there's no time there. He just knows how many iterations he did. He doesn't know how long it took. He has to finish the learning with a feeling that I'm not satisfied. And I'm willing to forego everything I had to get to a new level. He says that's what you need to have in the Garden of Eden. And the reason you have it is because you learned it from here, when you were in this life. אלא שהביטול שעל ידי הטבילה בנהר דינור הוא הביטול שמצד התחתון, והביטול שעל ידי העמוד הוא שמתבטא מצד גילויו של מדרגה העליונה שמאיר עליו. So why are the two things, the river of fire and the pillar? Because it says the river of fire is to get rid of the previous level, and the pillar is to ascend to the next level. But both of them require a nullification. The river of fire gets rid of the previous level, and the nullification that's required to move up, okay, that is the pillar. וזהו שהעלייה ממדרגה למדרגה הוא על ידי עבודה. אין להם מנוחה. And that's why they have toil. Their toil is not that they work hard. It's not hard to work there. אלא עבודת הביטול. But nullification. בדוגמת העבודה למטה בעולם הזה, which is similar to what we call toil down here. Our toil down here is not a nullification per se. Our toil down here, is to do mitzvahs. It's to move forward. There the toil is to nullify. שכללותה היא לצרף את הבריות, זיכוך וביטול ועבודה מלשון עיבוד אורות. Here, the toil is not nullification per se, but rather what we call clarification or refinement. Like when you refine leather, like the way they used to, the way it's still done today is done with a lot of chemicals. It was done back then with dog dung, right? Those were the chemicals that's where they got their chemicals from. But what you do is you refine it, you make it softer and softer. So down here it's becoming softer. That's refinement. That's like clarification. That's in Bria and down. Up there, for the soul, it's not refinement. The soul is as refined as it needs to be. It's nullification. And nullification really means, in the afterlife, it means being willing to forego the level that I'm at right now, in terms of understanding godliness, and seek a higher level. Okay.
that's the Gashmistic, to want something, to move, to change, willing to forego. That's the opposite.
Right? That's why you learn it from here. That's why the souls, before they come down here, they don't have that ability. They're stuck. They're like an angel. They're stuck at their level. That's why all the souls want to be down here. Because everybody wants to move. And interestingly, the angels that really coveted this reality, they didn't fare very well. Right? They came down here. They were given like a physical body, and they screwed it up completely. They couldn't handle it. So there is a difference. It's not that, like we say, angels and souls are not the same. In the spiritual realm, they seem more similar, but when they come down here, it's very evident that they're different. That the angel cannot handle the trials and difficulties of being a physical body. They don't know what to do with it.
So what happened to them?
Huh?
So what happens to them?
They became fallen. Uzziah and Azael, that's a famous story that was in Parshas Bereishis at the end. That there were... Anyway. ויש להוסיף, דכמו שהעבודה למטה היא בשני קווים סור מרע ועשה טוב, על דרך זה הוא גם בהביטול שבעליות הגן עדן. Now he adds something new, and he says, just as the toil below requires a balance between two movements, the left and the right axes, the left being gvura, might, and pushing things away, sur mera, can refrain from evil, and the right being bringing things closer. Here we're talking about doing good. So he says it, even though above it wouldn't seem to make much sense, but there's also in bittul, in nullification of what you have, there's also two aspects, a left and a right. What are they? So the Nahar Dinu, the river of fire that we mentioned, is canceling the previous state that I was in. That's like the left, because I'm pushing away what I had. That's from the right. So, and the pillar, which is what moves you up, that's more like the toil of the right side. Why? Because the right side is like to draw something close. So here is drawing the next level closer to him. It's a very interesting thing. Like what the Rebbe does is, he's using an analogy to surmise what it's like in the Garden of Eden. Okay?
Maybe he was there.
No, then he would say that I was there. And this is how it works. Okay, all this was to describe the Garden of Eden. Now, what about the times of Mashiach? גם אז יהיו כמה וכמה עליות. העליות שיהיו אז לא יהיו באופן דילכו מחיל אל חיל. שבכדי להגיע למדרגה נעלית יותר צריך לצאת ולהתבטא מהמדרגה הקודמת. אלא שגם בהיותו במדרגה הקודמת יוכל להתעלות למדרגה העליונה, עוד צריך עיון. He says the difference is that because it's the light of the Sovev, and Sovev is not levels, it's not integrated light. It's equal, everything is equal before it. So with the surrounding light in the times of Mashiach, what will happen is that you will move from level to level, but it's not levels, it's having everything at the same time. This explains why life is so confused now. We've talked about this in the past. What?
This sounds much more confusing.
This is how life is. You can have separate levels at the same time, concurrently. So on the one hand, the person could be steeped in very low actions that are very degrading. And at the same time, the same person. He's the same person. In the evening, he does terrible things. And in the morning, I don't want to say terrible things, but he does things that are not spiritually good. And in the morning, he learns the highest teachings. Or he does a great mitzvah. Or you have people who, in terms of Yiddishkeit, they don't keep anything, but they're tremendous Baalei Tzedakah. There's tons of people like that. You look at somebody like, I don't know, like Sheldon, what was his name? Sheldon, the guy from Las Vegas. I forgot his name.
Sheldon McGavin, I think.
Yeah. Sheldon Arison? No. What was his name?
Harrison.
No.
Harrison, no?
Anyway, here's a person who I don't know what he kept. He kept things. Certainly, as he grew older, he kept more and more. But his philanthropy was nothing like his personal conduct. I think. I don't know him. Edelman, Sheldon Edelman. No, Adelson. What was his name? He just passed away a year ago in the corona.
I know, but you got the name.
Anyway, you have this crazy thing.
Sometimes it's an insurance policy.
Could be, it doesn't matter. Even if it's an insurance policy.
Sometimes people.
But as people grow older, you saw that in the end, I think when he was 50, he married this woman, and a doctor, and she never, you know her. Edelson, right? With an E. Adelson. With an A.
Yeah.
You know her, right? She was from Hadassah, you said. Anyway. And he stayed with her. He didn't, I don't know. I don't think he did anything. And in general, yeah. And in general, people are mixed up in that sense. In the times of Mashiach, you have these. The Rebbe used to talk about this, that there's no more order in the world. It's not like, for most people, not Bali Tshuva certainly, that's like turning a person upside down, right? It's like it used to be that you were born and you moved, you progressed slowly through whatever direction your life was headed predeterminedly from the moment that you were born. And you ended it at some point and it was over. But today, people are all over the place. That's the nature of Soviv. We've talked about this in the past, that's the sign of our times, that the light of the Soviv is here. The fact that on your computer screen you can have 18 different things going on, that's Soviv. That's the light of the Soviv. Okay, so we have to.
Your clock is wrong, did you know that?
It's at least 5 minutes off, right?
No, it's about 15 minutes.
15 now? It's getting better.
When I left yesterday, I thought, that's good, 8:30, I got plenty of time to get to television. But my car said, well, it took me 20 minutes to walk downstairs.
I told you that my whole shita is that you should never go backwards. Only go forwards.
9:06 is the time, yeah. Because I find this subject very difficult. This whole subject.
Because?
I don't know, I just find it difficult. I think it's an inability to accept that there's going to be this world which is so unrelated to the world that we live in.
Why? This is the world that's unrelated. The world that existed 100 years ago would look at this world and say, what in the world is this? We talked about this, that the whole thing about that modern, this progressivism is really the light of the Soviv. They want everybody to be equal. I told you it's not normal, it's not human. But they've taken.
I thought about the fact that when it says the Tower of Babel, and they were all of one word,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? They were all using word. In fact, we're all using word on our computers as we're taking us back in some aspect to the Tower of Babel.
We talked about that at the beginning of the week. We mentioned this.
You did?
Yeah. We talked about it, that's what it means.
No, we didn't talk about that.
Yeah, the totalitarian regimes. We talked about totalitarian regimes for some reason.
But not the use of, the computer technology which is equal to everybody. I can open a computer in Serbo-Croatian and still find my way around because even though I can't understand any words, I know
That's Soviv. That's Soviv. It used to be that every tool that you made was a one of a kind. Now all tools are manufactured. They're all the same. Manufacturing has made everything all the same. Now, the whole chiddush will be when there is individual manufacturing. Individual mass manufacturing that's catered to the individual.
Rolls Royce could do it with their cars.
The very small changes on the top, the pattern of the stars.
The badge, yeah.
No, it's not enough yet. When you'll have a machine that will, you see, that's one of the things you can't get. You can't get a machine that will make you the dinner you want. You would think that that would be the first machine you would try to make. Because everybody has to eat dinner. Not everybody has to drive.
We're getting married, honey.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, I'll ask you the question I asked somebody a long time ago.